landscape photography world, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. This time I'll be talking to William Patino about his photography career and what gets him going. William grew up in the coastal town of Wollongong, New South Wales in Australia, and has been a full-time landscape photographer since 2014. He now resides in the mountainside town of Te Anau in the South Island of New Zealand. Photography came into William's life around 2011, and it has helped him see the world differently, giving him a newfound appreciation for nature and the many intricacies that many overlook and perhaps take for granted. William's work is based around a deep reverence and awe of nature and the Creator, and it's this that he tries to express through his images. His love for dramatic light and atmosphere is a constant inspiration, and he enjoys the endless pursuit of these elusive moments and the freedom that is found within. Most at home in his adopted backyard of Fiordland and its mountainous landscapes, William truly enjoys rugged coastal scenes and being amidst the infinite greens of the rainforests. Exploration and weather plays a huge role in his photography, and he draws inspiration from exploring the unknown and those fleeting, spontaneous moments in nature. We discuss his methods of teaching in his workshops and online courses, the importance of being a business person first and foremost when it comes to setting up a photography business, and his sense of wonder at the world around us. I hope you enjoyed the show.
G'day, mate. You're going really well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, that's fantastic to have you on board. Definitely been a fan of your work for a little while, and very pleased that you've agreed to come on. So,
my pleasure. Thanks.
No worries. Why don't you start with how you got started in photography, and landscape photography in particular?
Mate, photography in general goes back to about 2011. I went to Europe with my wife, and we just thought, we better get a decent camera for the trip. So we ended up buying like a Canon DSLR twin lens kit combo, one of those, little packages, which I'm sure people have seen before.
That was one of my first packages too,
yeah. Yeah, it was a 550D. So I grabbed that, and on that trip, I had depression at the time and was in a pretty rough place. And on that trip, it really helped a lot. And using the camera, I was pretty drawn to it straight away. But when the holiday finished, I kind of didn't touch the camera again. And then, to cut a long story short, I happened to download Instagram around that same time period when I just searched photography in the App Store. And I'd never heard of Instagram. Hardly anyone had back then, 2011. And when I downloaded that and just had a look at some photos, I was seeing a lot of landscape images, and I thought, man, that looks cool. That looks like fun. And I just thought, I've got that camera in the cupboard. Maybe I should just have a play with that again and see if I could do this. And I was using the iPhone initially, just taking iPhone photos for a week or two. And then, I decided to try my hand at using that other camera again. And I just instantly fell in love with it, mate. And it was something that, to this day, I'm so thankful for the way it's made me view the world, and it's just changed my entire outlook on everything. So I use the camera as a tool for, just expressing myself and getting out there, and curiosity, being led by curiosity, and searching all the coastlines where I used to live in Wollongong. Mm-hmm. And it just went from there, mate. And it was just like a perfect recipe, because you had someone who, I just gave everything to photography. The first sunrise I watched, I was hooked straight away. And because I was in a bit of a rough place in life, just, from that mental health perspective, and the camera and just being outdoors and pursuing those moments was something that, started to bring me back to life again. And I just latched onto it with everything. And I was literally out there every day of the week. No joke. Almost every sunrise, every sunset, I just threw my everything into it. And it's been like that for, 10, 11 years now, more or less.
Yeah, a lot of people I talk to talk about that sort of, it's their happy place or their relaxation place, or, their Zen moment, or whatever you want to call it. But I guess, what is it, do you think it is, that sort of drives that mental health improvement that comes from getting out and about and being outdoors? Is it just being outdoors and being out in nature, or is it something a bit more than that?
I'd say there's a few factors. Like you just said, I think a big one is going back to nature and getting away from man-made things. I know you've got a camera in hand, but just quality time outdoors, which is something that civilization as a whole is doing less and less as we now live in cities and suburbia and rely on technology. So I think going back to something that's embedded in us, whether you think of that from an evolutionary perspective or a creation perspective, but then also the other part is, and I've thought about this answer quite a few times, is, when you're absorbed doing a task, particularly something creative, you get into what's called a flow state. And there's been studies done on what's called the flow state, and it's literally where a part of your brain disengages. And during that time, it's very similar to meditation. You can't think about anything else, and whatever that could be, whether it's personal issues at home, global affairs, whatever. You're just completely absorbed in that moment. And photography allows you to get into that flow state, so just like many other creative outlets do. So I feel like, with photography, when you finish doing what you're doing and you might get back to the car or get home and you feel like, oh, wow, like you've come out of that flow state now. And it is just like coming out of some kind of meditative state of mind. And I think that's what a lot of people might be experiencing as well. It's just that opportunity to disengage and just be zoned in on something so simple, but that allows the brain to finally just have a little bit of rest. And I think that there's huge benefits in that. And there is studies done, mental health studies on, getting in that state of flow, and you can do it cooking, playing music, whatever it is. It's all these creative outlets. So there's huge benefits in it. That's why I'm a huge advocate for just being creative in general, but particularly photography, because I know what it's done in my life and other people's, and I just think it's so great.
Yeah, totally. And I'm certainly an advocate the same. It's certainly helped my mental health a hell of a lot in the past few years. And I'd recommend it to anyone, or any, as you say, any other creative pursuit that allows you to disengage. I think it's a really important thing to get into.
Yeah, so, what's cool about photography or landscape photography is that going out in nature in itself, just to go for a hike or a walk, that is in itself a great thing. But then photography adds another level there where it could help you. Some people, they might find it hard to go for a walk, but if you've got the camera there, it just gives you that another reason to get out. And then you're looking at things at a smaller detail as well and taking your time a lot more. Photographers, we tend to do that, and then we enjoy the finest of details and we learn to see those details, and the benefits that come from seeing the world in that way are just, unimaginable. It just goes on and on and on. And that's what I love, is that, even now the sun is slowly starting to set here. So I observe all the highlights on the clouds changing, the shadows getting longer on the mountains, all those different things. Whereas before photography, I just would never have even taken a second glimpse of that.
Well, I think another thing, and this has come up a couple of times on the podcast, where people have said, they start to feel a little bit more attuned with what's going on around them, and not just at a micro level, minute to minute, or day to day, but also seasonally. So over, people know when astro season is. The astrophotographers are all out there, at 3 a.m, because they know the Milky Way core is going to rise at that time over that particular mountain or whatever, Exactly. So, it sort of gets you that in tune with what's going on around you.
Yeah.
In terms of a full-time career, how did you make the decision to take it beyond just a hobby and make a career out of it? Because a lot of people have it as that mental release and as that, that escape from day-to-day work. Is turning it into a job, something that everyone, not everyone maybe should do, but, everyone should at least have a look at?
No, I'd say definitely not everyone should look at it, because it's just not cut out for everyone, and it can definitely take away from the joy. So for me, I never picked a camera up to turn it into a career or anything. I didn't consider even trying to make a single dollar from photography. I picked it up just out of curiosity, and then it turned into just a love and a passion. And I started to, as the years rolled on, just as you do, getting requests for, do you sell prints? Do you teach? Do you run workshops? Started to get even opportunities to travel with like tourism boards in Australia back in the day. So I was organically getting these things come up without me going out to pursue them. And initially I was turning some of the stuff down because, like I said, it just wasn't really on my radar. Mm-hmm. So then eventually I got a website and sold a few prints, and that was that was a huge honor. And then, did a couple of travel gigs with tourism guys, but still, again, didn't even consider doing it full time, not even part time. I was a tradesman at the time, so I was busy enough just working a 40-hour week, being a tradie. I even sold an image to Apple, and it was on every Mac in the world, one of these images as a wallpaper. And I had guys at work saying, "Oh man, you're making the big time now. When are you going to do it full time?" And 100%, with all my heart, I would just say, not really. I don't think it's really possible. I'm not really interested. I just said no. I just didn't really feel the need to try and do it full time. And I think I did think it would be hard. I couldn't really see how it could probably work. And I probably had a fear of failure deep down in there as well. Mm-hmm. And there was that element of thinking, if I made it a job, then maybe I'd start to hate it and it wouldn't be that outlet anymore. So there was that involved. But what happened was my wife got pregnant with our first child, my son. And once he was born, life gets busier when you've got a full-time job, then you've got a wife at home, now you've got a baby, and then you've got this photography on the side, which I was able to give a lot of attention to, but I wanted to be a great father. So I knew, all right, well, photography is going to have to take a back seat for a little bit. And then around that same period where my son was like literally a month or two old, there was a few changes happening at work where I was probably going to have to travel a little bit more, driving up to 2 hours one way, like from Wollongong up to Sydney. And so there was just a few things kind of happening all at once. And then it just kind of popped into my head for the first time, like maybe I should do photography full time so I have more control over my family time and, being able to use the camera. It didn't really sit right with me to just say, all right, this photography thing was fun, but now I just so slowly let it just burn, just drift away. I was already turning down opportunities to travel to other countries, even with some of these tourism gigs. But because I had the full-time job, I was turning them down. So it just started to I was like, man, I don't know if I want to let this go. What if I just try, give it 12 months, and if it fails, then at least I had a go. I'd rather die trying than not trying at all. But it was only literally like it just all suddenly seemed right to me all of a sudden. But the main premise I had was through education, because I was starting to teach at that stage on the weekends with workshops. Yep. And it was that switch that went off in my head. Like, I actually enjoy teaching, and there could probably be a solid business model here, not relying on print sales or, doing a tourism shoot somewhere, but if I can teach full time and run longer workshops. But the only way I could run a longer workshop is to not have a full-time job. So it was like, you either have to quit and give it a go or just forget about it. And it was just like this natural crossroad where I hit, and I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. And it was pretty scary, a newborn baby, leaving a full-time job. My wife quit her work to be a full-time mum. She was on maternity leave, but she had no intention of going back to work. So I had a lot on my shoulders. But like I said, it just didn't seem right really, to just go, okay, I'll continue doing what was that, mate?
I said it's really jumping out of the plane without the parachute, isn't it?
Oh, more or less, yeah. But, and I kind of realized I was pretty unhappy at work. I was just going through the motions and just trying to just get through the day by just doing the bare minimum. I didn't have a good work ethic because I wasn't happy where I was, to be honest. So I thought, give it a go. And it's been, almost 8 years now, and no looking back, and 100% no regrets whatsoever. And it's certainly, I work a lot harder now running my own business and providing for the family off something as landscape photography. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but just the drive I have to do this is just so different to where I was. And just even mentally, just every aspect of my life, I feel like has benefited from, just taking that leap of faith and I just feel like I'm a better man, to be honest, by doing it. But it is tricky, and it's sometimes I'll get people contacting me who they've barely picked up a camera and they say, all right, I want to make it a career. What's the first steps? And something like landscape photography, it's so different to commercial photography where, this is, to me, this is an art. It's more of an art. You're trying to make money from art, which is never an easy thing to do. It's just so different to other genres like real estate or something like that. So it's certainly not something I feel like you can just say, all right, I'm going to go and do this full time without having put in the hours and maybe organically getting to that point where you can make the decision, which is what happened to me. Yep. I feel like it'd be pretty hard to just start from scratch and say, all right, how do I make this a full-time paying career? So it's certainly not something that is for everyone, or, it's a tricky one. And I think most people will know if they're in a position to potentially do what I did and make that leap of faith. Getting to that point, my biggest advice would be to just put everything into your photography and do not even consider making money from it. Just like I did. I wasn't thinking about any monetary side of photography. All I wanted to do was be a better photographer. And I just wanted to experience new places and see things that I hadn't seen before and then do them justice. That was the only priority. And to this day, it's still the exact same thing. And I think when you do that, it'll eventually show through your work. And then maybe from there, opportunities could come up. So it's almost like, what's your motive? What's your motive behind your work and your photography? And if you get the balance wrong, then I think you might have a pretty short time enjoying the whole process.
Yeah, I certainly don't think you can just go into it thinking, oh, yeah, well, this will be easy to make money out of, because
otherwise we'd all be doing it, right?
Well, that's it. If it was easy, it wouldn't. It probably wouldn't pay as much either.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it pays that much either, mate. That's
what I mean. It'd be even cheaper.
Yeah, exactly.
So talk to me a little bit about the workshops, and I guess the how and why. You said the education side of it. You were running short workshops. How did you sort of latch onto that as a career move, I guess?
I started getting people just through Instagram, back in the day, just say, oh, do you teach, do you run workshops? And initially it was just, oh, no, sorry. Didn't even know what a workshop was. And then eventually somehow I wish I could remember, but yeah, I built up the courage to say yes to someone, and they came down from Sydney and we did a sunrise shoot. And, I just taught them what I knew at the time, how I was making my images and how I saw the world and everything. And seeing this person's face light up when I just helped them in what seemed simple to me, but to them, it was probably 6 months of frustration or 12 months of trying to figure something out. And within 10 minutes, I showed them. And yes, it was so rewarding just seeing that look on their face and that elation and almost like a weight off their shoulders, like, oh man, I've been trying to figure that out. And so that, that really gave me the confidence. So maybe I do have some knowledge here to share. And keep in mind, I'd probably only been shooting for a year and a half at this stage, but the hours I built up were pretty astronomical. Like I said, I just latched onto it and threw everything at it. So from there, I just started doing more private ones, sunrise, a little bit of processing, that type of thing. And then I started doing some small groups around like Cathedral Rocks and Bombo Quarry, doing like a sunset and astro type thing, group of 6. And that was scary, doing a first group. How do you manage a group of people and all safety hazards and all this stuff? But same thing, everyone had a good time and it was really rewarding. So when it came to that crossroad where I thought maybe I could make a career out of it, I thought, I do enjoy the teaching so much. It just feels natural to me. And I remember being younger, I wanted to be a teacher at one point before I wanted to be like a school teacher or something. So it kind of was like it went full circle then. So yeah, the whole idea was built upon, if I can just do some longer ones and do, a dozen or less than a dozen per year, longer as in like a week long, that type of thing. Maybe then there's a more sustainable business model than, say, hoping just to sell a print, for example, which is just, if you're trying to put food on the table for family, it's just, it's just too risky.
Print sales is going to be, risky strategy, I'd say.
Yeah, exactly. Any type of sales thing, unless you've got some solid strategies there. So when I quit, it was like, all right, maybe I can do a week in New Zealand, because I find Australia, how I like to photograph anyway, a little bit hard to like drag out a week-long trip.
Okay.
Not in the manner that I like to teach and flow and just keep things kind of fast moving anyway. Not fast moving, but just provide enough, scenery in different locations. So I thought if I could get to NZ and consider doing a week there, and then I'll see what happens from then. So over the years, New Zealand, obviously I live in New Zealand now. I've lived here for 5 years, but
Yep.
I would come over to NZ and do maybe 4 trips per year, just week-long trips, groups of 6. I always limit it to 6 people. Anything more than that, I just think it's not fair to the clients. They're not getting enough learning time and there's not enough room on location. So I've always limited it.
I think it's really hard to manage any more than 6 people.
Yeah, and I did it once. I did like 7 and I just thought, it's not really the right, I like to make it pretty intimate and personal and more like friends, you know what I mean? So 6 was always the max. And just started off with NZ and then pretty quickly went to Iceland and started doing a couple of trips there per year. And if you're going to summarize the most of my career, it's probably been majority New Zealand workshops. And then I've probably done about 12 in Iceland, half a dozen in Canada, Patagonia. But when I moved to New Zealand, the whole idea was I don't want to travel away from family anymore. Not that I was traveling a lot. It would only be, once a year I'd go to Iceland and you'd just be gone for 2 to 3 weeks. But, that feels like an eternity when you're on the other side of the world. So
absolutely.
Now that I live here in NZ, I'm able to more or less, and I've had no choice with COVID, with borders shutting, but I've kind of made my business now just 100% New Zealand based. And that's just doing my groups of 6, maybe do half a dozen of them per year as a rough guess, maybe a bit more. And then just personal private workshops. And then with the whole COVID thing, I've moved a lot of my like teaching and education onto the online world. So just doing a lot of tutorials and online mentoring and everything like that. So it's something that's changed. Every year it's almost changed. I'm just grateful that leading up to COVID, I already decided that I didn't really want to go to Iceland anymore or Patagonia or anything like that. So I was already shifting towards just being put in NZ. And then, like I said, with the borders closing off, it was pretty much forced to be that way anyway. So now moving forward, don't have a choice. But moving forward, any international travel I do, I'd rather just take the family with me and just do it as a holiday, or maybe do the odd private trip or with a friend and do like just something for my own photography, just for portfolio or something like that. But I've always enjoyed the teaching and I just find it, like I said, pretty organic and rewarding, and just sharing special places and those memorable moments with people. Some of my fondest moments have been on workshops, and I've got lifelong memories and friends from the workshops I've been running over the years. And some people have had 3 or 4 trips, and it just feels like family after a while. And I'm pretty thankful to be able to do what I do, but I've missed it because I haven't ran a group workshop for 2 years because with the borders shut and most of my clients are from outside the country. So, I've truly missed it because there's a lot of good camaraderie on these trips. You get a bunch of photographers together and everyone's just telling stories and life experiences, and it's pretty awesome. I'm really thankful to be able to do what I do.
So what were the challenges you found in, during the pandemic in shifting to online? I mean, obviously you can't go on location, so you're kind of limited to what you can do. So other than that, what were the main challenges?
So the main big one was I had normally a workshop with me will book out sometimes 12 months in advance, 6 to 12 months in advance, and people will either just leave a deposit or a payment and they can pay it off in installments. So when 2020 kicked off, most of the year was booked. People had left deposits. People had either maybe paid the whole trip because some of the trips were coming up pretty quickly the same week the borders shut, basically. So when everything shut down, and we didn't know how long it was going to be shut for, I potentially had, just throw a number out there, but 50 to 60 paying customers on my books who were like, all right, let's just wait and see. So it just became a game of, all right, let's push all the dates back several months. And then the borders are still shut. Let's push it back again. In the meantime, I have no income coming in because I'm not running these trips, and I'm not invoicing for any future trips because there's too much uncertainty. And my wife, she stays at home and looks after the kids and runs a household and everything. So there was obviously immense pressure there to figure this out. And then at the same time, and understandably, I'm having people that are booked in saying, oh, I'll just have my money back now, thanks, and things like that. So suddenly you're in a situation where the income stopped, you've taken money from people and can't deliver their product, what they were expecting, but that money potentially came in 6 months ago. And normally there would be a flow of fresh money coming in for the workshops that are coming up, just like how an airline would run, for example.
Yeah.
So yeah, mate, I had to figure something out quick. And thankfully I had some like video tutorials made, which, by this point, they're probably 6 to 12 months old. And I'd already kind of push those as much as I could from a sales perspective. So I thankfully, to be honest, I had someone reach out to me who worked in marketing, someone from the States, and they just happened to see my tutorials and just somehow I came across on their radar. And yeah, so I partnered with these people, and they have given me a pretty good help with the marketing side of things. And that has honestly kept us afloat for the last 2 years. And thankfully where I live, which is no coincidence, it's very scenic. So I've been able to still get out there, create new photographs, which I've always done just for me, just shooting all the time for me. And then at the same time, be able to keep creating just new courses, new tutorials, showing different things. And that's kind of kept me busy enough because I have to shoot them myself. Then I have to edit all the video. So I had a career that was, let's say 90% out in the field and 10% digital. And then now it's 90% digital and maybe, 10% out in the field if I'm lucky. So I've had to kind of flip everything, with a pretty short notice there. And to be honest, the hardest part was just, and it still is, it's just the weight on my shoulders of having a lot of people that are still waiting to come over here. And yeah, some of them might have paid 2 years ago now, and they've been very supportive and they've got a credit. So they're just, we've just had to keep moving dates along. But it's just not nice, mate, just not being able to give people, their trip and everything. So that's been the most challenging part. And I'm not the only one in this position. Like every industry, one way or another, has had to do similar things. And I had holiday booked with our family for the Cook Islands. And yeah, we just got told it's a credit. And if you don't use it by this date, you lose it all. And yeah, so it's hard. And then just dealing with so many different people from different parts of the world who are also going through their own individual struggles, and they're saying, well, they can't come now. And yeah, it's just been incredibly stressful. And even as of today, I've still had a bit of a stressful day just dealing with said scenarios. So yeah, it's been hard, mate. But look, I'm still here and I'm still somehow being a full-time landscape photographer. So I definitely can't complain. I'm pretty grateful. And now when I'm making a tutorial, for example, when I talk to a camera, it's like I'm just talking to people because I'm almost envisioning the people that are going to be viewing this later on. And one benefit of video tutorials is that anyone in the world can watch them, whether they're somewhere in Bangladesh or China or in the States. They may have never been able to come to New Zealand and learn from me one-on-one in the flesh or have a week-long trip, but now they're able to learn from home and apply the teaching. So it's been pretty rewarding. I don't get to see the look on people's faces now when they have that aha moment, but yeah, just to get words of support and feedback and messages from people who are, just leaving kind words about some of the things they've learned. So yeah, it's still been pretty rewarding in that regard, but I definitely prefer not talking to a camera as much and just being out there with people hands-on. I definitely miss it. And now we've got borders opening as of next month and people can start to enter the country again and they don't have to isolate or anything. So hopefully this year we start to run some of these workshops again and just get the ball rolling, mate.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Well, hopefully business will pick back up again and you'll be back where you were a couple of years ago. Hopefully.
Yeah, it's just been a tricky one for everybody and it's just an ongoing evolving scenario. So just I'm someone that always tries to, look at it from the other person's perspective as well. So I'm pretty sympathetic with people, but it's just really hard in just so many variables involved. So it hasn't been easy. That's for sure. But thankfully, yeah, most people, they get it. They understand this is a husband and wife business here. I'm not a multinational corporation. That's just, yeah. Oh, mate.
So in terms of travel and locations, what, obviously, you've got to be thinking about where to go next. Where next?
For workshops, or you mean personally?
Oh, personally or workshops?
Yeah, workshops, I kind of stick to you need like permits here in New Zealand to run a workshop. You need them in most places, actually, whether people realize it or not. So
Yeah.
when I run a workshop here, or to even get permission to run workshops, you need to put an application in saying where you will be, what time of year, how many people, how many hours, all this type of thing. So when it comes to my workshops, I've got like a good, 2 dozen type of locations that
Yeah,
I will
right.
float between. And I keep all my workshops, the itinerary is flexible. I don't book anything in advance. Landscape photography is all about pursuing the weather and the light, and
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
got to be at the right place at the right time. So yeah, on a given workshop, the order could be reversed or all over the place in which order we see things, but I still have like basically like key regions that I concentrate on
Got it. Yeah.
for all my NZ stuff. So that's kind of pretty straightforward. And yeah, any other travel and shooting, look, I'm just so content here. There's so much wilderness here and areas that have not even rarely ever been seen by a single human, to be honest, let alone another photographer or anything. So if I have spare time, I'm just getting out here as much as I can. I just come down from a mountain today. I did a 30K hike last week. So sometimes, you could be putting a few hours in just getting out there.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll do aerials, but there's just so much here still. If you said, all right, Will, here's a month and a bit of budget, where would you go in the world? I'd probably stay here in NZ because it's just where my heart is and
Fair enough.
where there's just so many things that I still want to see and do here. I think potentially in 2024, I'll be up in Alaska and
Okay.
British Columbia with a mate doing some pretty remote wilderness stuff up there. But otherwise, yeah, there's not too much on the horizon. I'm really drawn to just things that I haven't seen too much before.
Yeah.
I don't really want to go and just replicate something that I've seen another photographer do. It just doesn't really drive me that much. So I'm more driven by just the unknown, the unseen. And that's even when I first picked the camera up, was the coastlines that I was walking along. It was just like, oh, I wonder what's around the corner here. And I'll just keep walking and then find some rock shelves or sea stacks or things. And I just hadn't seen the photos of them before, or just I didn't even know they were there. So it's the whole package for me, really. It's that excitement and that curiosity. It all factors into it. If I don't have that excitement and that sense of curiosity, then I just don't feel compelled to really take the photo as much. So yeah, a big part of what I do is just getting out there and I want to be surprised by nature. That's where I feel the most inspired. And there's nothing wrong with photographing things that have been shot before. Don't get me wrong. I still do that myself, but I find the most inspiration I get is when I'm just out in nature and something catches me off guard, or I'm just going into an area where everything's fresh. So it's almost like it doesn't matter where I point the camera, I'm feeling inspired to try and work with the subject matter that I've got in front of me. Certainly not easy, of course. Sometimes it takes a lot of planning, or you need the right conditions, or it's just hard work to get to some of the spots. But yeah, that really excites me. Just that it's like a question of, yeah, but what if this happens at this spot and the light does this and the snow does that? And yeah, I get pretty excited about that. So yeah, for now, mate, New Zealand is more than happy to be locked up here. As long as people can still get in, I'm happy. But I don't care if the borders are shut and I can't get out. That doesn't bother me. I just need people to be able to get in. That's the main thing.
Fair enough. So, what in talking about the planning, tell me a little bit about what it takes to put a workshop together. Particularly one of your longer ones, a week or so.
Yeah, look, it's, something, obviously when you first start doing those, it's nerve wracking and you're barely sleeping at night because you're trying to make everything, you don't want any hiccups and you're trying to pre-plan everything to perfection. Now for me, it's, like I said, there's things in place beforehand, which people would never even realize. Like I said, getting permits or concessions, they're called, having safety plans in place, all that type of thing. But for the workshop itself, it's just knowing where to get people at what time of day and making sure that people are going home with a memory card full of photos that they're absolutely stoked on, and having a good variety of different images as well. So really, I adapt everything to the weather. So if there's rainy weather, I'm making sure that we're getting in rainforests and waterfalls and everything, even some mountains and rivers and whatnot. And then, of course, clearer skies is going to bring us into areas where we can see the tops of the bigger mountains and things like that. I always try and make sure that we're getting some processing in during the week as well. But again, I don't lock anything in place, because you could be missing out on a magical moment. So I always make sure that we'll do a couple of processing sessions. I'll do like a group one where I'll show everyone my general workflow. And then the next ones will just be more private, customized, going around helping everybody one-on-one with their own individual photos. The main things really is, as much as it's a photography trip, it's almost like you're a parent to 6 other adults. Everyone has to be well-fed, well-rested, and entertain and getting value for their money at the end of the day. So for me, it's just monitoring all those things and gauging, are they ready to push on a bit more, or maybe that's enough for now? And that just comes from experience now. As the years have rolled on, there's not really any nerves with me. A lot of it's almost intuition, to be honest. But it's just all those little things that I think people just wouldn't even consider. It's not as simple as we're going to go here at this time, there at that time. No, it's more like, all right, what if there's a double rainbow, or you can see it coming? Where are you going to get people? You've got 20 minutes. Where are you going to go? And then, maybe there's the aurora happening because you're in Iceland, but you got to factor in what time do we have to start tomorrow. So it's just all those it's just logistics, at the end of the day, but just making sure, it's a fine line between highly successful, but then maybe people just getting a bit too burnt out because you've just driven them too far.
One location too many.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, I've done so many here now that I know it. It's just like the back of my hand, and I kind of know where we're going to flow. I know the distances, the times, and even on location, it's just figuring out how long is too long, how long is not enough. And then, all right, where are we trying to get to? What time should we really pack up? So they're things that just kind of come with time, I guess, at the end of the day. But I'm really just wanting people, when they go home, to just be like, wow, like that my photography's improved so much, and I've got all these images here that I'm stoked on. And they've just got that knowledge to do it again next time they go out with the camera. A 7-day workshop, 6 nights, 7 days. But by the second day, people, even if they're a complete beginner, 2 days in, they're already like 200% better than they were on the first day. And then so by the end of the week, everyone's like, they're getting shots that I'm like, wow, I would have that in my portfolio. And that's kind of the goal, really. That's what it's all about, I guess. So I enjoy the challenge. Some of my favorite photography is just spontaneous, and I like that element of stress. When I do aerials, I think that's what I enjoy about aerials, is that you really have to think on the spot and react very quickly to what's happening. And with the workshops, it's a little bit like that sometimes, where you just want to make sure that you're not missing an opportunity, because it does happen every now and then. Something will occur and you just miss it, like a rainbow or killer sunset, and you're not quite at the right spot, whatever it is. And I enjoy the challenge of making sure that I'm going to get these people somewhere awesome right at the best time type thing. So it's always good fun. And like I said, I've missed it. I've just missed that camaraderie and just that look on people's faces when it's all coming together. So it's good fun.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the art itself. How would you, if someone was looking for your work, how would you describe your style?
I guess, I always say to people, like, I don't try to take pretty photos. They're not like postcard pretty. I'd say it's more like evocative landscape photography. I wouldn't even say dramatic or moody, because it's not necessarily that, but it's something that evokes some kind of emotion. So maybe evocative landscape photography. I do enjoy photographing. I like to photograph scenes that move me personally. If I don't feel like moved, like, that feeling you get in your chest where you're just like awestruck, in awe of what you're looking at. Then I don't really take the photo. So I'm constantly pursuing those types of moments, those ones that are just like, oh man, this is, your hands are almost shaking. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm trying to capture. And it just turns out that most of the time that's some kind of big scene, whether it's big mountains, waterfalls, storms, big waves on the coast. There's some kind of element of power in there.
Sure.
When I have a pretty spiritual connection, just in general, but when I'm in the landscape in particular, so that, I guess that sometimes channels through the work. There's just a reverence for the creation there, and I'm trying to express that through the imagery. I'm not trying to just I don't want to take a postcard photo. I'm trying to take the best moment in a given location and put my thoughts and expressions into that image. So yeah, I know that's a pretty long-winded answer, I guess, but yeah, ultimately it's landscape photography. It's landscapes, but yeah, there's something if I look at my work, or like I said, or I'm in that moment, if I'm just not feeling it from a deep down in the chest type thing, then no one will ever see the photo, or it won't be taken in the first place. So yeah, I like those moving moments that really kind of just strike you in the heart. That's what drives me.
Yeah. So in terms of that, thing that gets you going and gets that feeling in the chest, what are the things that you're looking for in a location that are likely to sort of trigger that with you?
The biggest factor is weather. It's just amazing how much the weather plays a role in my photography. Whether it's something as simple as, all right, we need the right light hitting this area of the location, or it could be, I need the wind to be sweeping up the waterfall, or the wind to be blasting the snow sideways. It could be rain. I like to photograph in the rain because it does some pretty amazing things here in Fiordland where I live. They're the things that initially, like that would be the biggest role, I guess, is weather. That's the biggest factor, really. So every day I'm just looking at the weather, and I'm looking at it not just for the current day, but for the week ahead. And then from there, I start to build out, I've just got a million ideas in my head, but I wait for the kind of weather to start to align. And then I'll be like, oh, maybe I should go here. This week looks good for that thing or that thing, whatever it is. So yeah, the weather's the number one factor, really. And then I'm trying to use that in the image somehow. A lot of my images have some kind of movement, whether it's movement with waves, waterfalls, some kind of sense of wind in the frame, falling snow. I really enjoy movement, like it's some kind of element, like some kind of force or energy within the frame. So I'm definitely factoring that in as much as possible. I can't even remember what your question was now, mate, but yeah.
That's okay.
But that's what I'm looking for, really, is that, the weather dictates so much. Yeah. Just the seasons in general.
No, you pretty much nailed what I was asking for.
As I got halfway through and I'm like, I can't quite remember, but anyway, I'll keep going.
in terms of looking for those, sort of unshot locations, I mean, obviously there are locations around, as you said, Alaska and Canada and southwestern Tasmania, and there are places around. How do you think that, I guess, or how much do you think that is going to influence other people, in seeing your images and other people's images to make those same sort of efforts in traveling to those sort of locations?
I'd say maybe, realistically 0.5%, not even, of people that view my work might try and, or be inspired to go out and experience proper wilderness for themselves and, go to, I never geotag anything. There's just no point anyway. And plus, even if I did, it's like, you can't drive a car there. It's just, the wilderness and places that are popular now around the world, it all stem from some bloke or a female putting on a backpack and bush bashing and finding these things.
Yep.
And I was on a trail today, and I'm like, I think when you're near a trail, you should definitely, not blatantly start to blaze marks going off the trail, because a trail gets a lot of traffic. And once you walk off the trail and it's evident that you have 3 footprints or something, then it inspires others to do the same. You see that in Iceland, any hotspot, you can just see where people have left the trail. And but at the end of the day, if we remove wilderness and the sense of exploration, then now nature is no longer an escape. It's just like being in a city where you can find to sidewalks and
if you can just drive up and park next to it, it's not.
And if you get in trouble for going off and bush bashing, going in the wilderness, like that's what it's all about. It's that experience, and you got to do that hands-on and get out there. So for me, like I said, the inspiration comes more natural when it is typically something I haven't really seen before. And if people say, wow, I want to go to that spot, then I welcome it, because they're going to have an amazing experience if they can get there, or if they know where it is, for example. And another person going to, the problems arise where you're getting thousands of people per day or per month or something like that. And I just can't see that happening. When it's proper wilderness, there's no risk, because it's just too hard. It's more the hot spots, like say Milford Sound, for example, where you drive right to the car park and it's right there, and they've got a boardwalk there, and you can go out on the foreshore, and that's great. But when it involves now, and that's why it gets a lot of people, like say Iceland, every photo you see of Iceland is just parking the car and it's basically right there.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. That's good.
That old DC3 that's in the middle of a farmer's field that you got to walk near.
Yeah, now you have to walk to it. Yeah, exactly. It's like a 40-minute walk on nice flat ground, nice and easy to get to.
I can't blame them.
And yeah, surprisingly, they're pretty happy to still put in the effort to get to that. But once, obviously, if things get a little bit harder, it's just not for everyone. Maybe you don't have the fitness, you don't have the time. So that's why I feel like, the places that are pretty hard to get to, those that are willing to put in the effort or seek it out, then yeah, go for it. But I feel like there's pretty little risk in certain things blowing up if the effort's too high and getting. It's more like if it's pretty close to a hotspot, and then you've clearly made these, innumerable tracks, and it's only like a 5-minute walk. That's where something starts to become the next big thing, and then maybe the landscape gets trampled and ruined. I'm pretty big in leaving no trace and everything, but when it's in the actual backcountry, like you have to actually climb up and use trees and shrubs and everything like that. But I think it's when we're in those highly populated tourist icons, that's where particularly you need to just think about your actions. But ultimately, yeah, if it's photographed a lot, it's easy to get to, and that's fine. That's just what it is.
Yeah. What do you think about the stuff, and have you seen evidence of it as well, where people are sort of, it is a hot spot, it's been oversaturated on Instagram and so forth, and it's just flocking people there that may not necessarily have the same leave no trace ethic. There's been many cases of that. Have you seen any evidence in some of the locations you've been? And I'm just interested in your thoughts.
Yeah,
on the influence that social media has had on that accessibility.
Yeah, you see it in I don't know, like it's not. I haven't seen too much here where it's like there's been stuff left in the landscape. Like let's say the Wanaka tree, for example. Like I've been there in the past where there's been 45, 50 people, and they're just all there doing the same thing. They're just admiring the scenery. But then when they walk away, it's typically all fine. I think in Iceland, some places you go to and like there'll be a little chain that you can just step over, and then everyone steps over it. So now you've got 4 footpaths instead of the one original footpath. So that starts to damage the overall landscape. And yeah, look, at the end of the day, I guess my attitude towards that is if you're that desperate to create a fresh image, don't go to the icon and think it's special by walking an extra 5 meters closer than everyone else. That's not unique. That's not art. That's not creative. Yeah. That's just you putting in the most minimal effort to try and take something slightly different. So yeah, and I get frustrated with that, because go to these icons and enjoy them from the proper spot. And then if you have a desire to do something unique, then go somewhere unique. Doing it at these other places, it just creates more problems. And that's the world we live in now with social media. It's not even actually photographers anymore. Like, let's say like landscape photographers, it's just social media, people with iPhones, which is everyone, with a smartphone. Yeah. It just fuels itself. And then someone goes, I want to get a better one, or I want a selfie with no one behind me, so I'm going to step over the line. That's a lot. Mainly that's who I see is creating the problems, is just general tourists, actually. Yeah. And yeah, look, at the end of the day, what can we do about that? Something's got to change in our culture. It's a cultural thing. I don't really think it's like, it's not landscape photography, to be honest. I think it's just the culture of, it's a narcissistic culture. Everyone wants to have that shot on their social media and want to look perfect and, whatever it is, and prove that you went to these spots. And then, one person takes an extra step, and then someone takes, and then people die. There's places where, unfortunately, we know even in Australia, there's places that I photographed in Australia. Here's an example: the Helensburgh train tunnel, where there's that waterfall. I remember getting a shot there in 2013, and I went back several times to get the rain. I'd never seen it the way that I photographed it, but I thought, man, that'll come out pretty cool. And I got this image. And, got bombarded with where's this? And I didn't reply to anyone because I knew, you tell someone where it is, it's just going to get out of hand. But sure enough, someone eventually finds it and then they want to tell people so they get props for it.
Yeah.
And then next thing, now there's a fence around the place. And the same thing happened with that Sea Cliff Bridge. I remember climbing up the cliff there to get a higher vantage point, which I hadn't really seen done before.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately the shot went viral, and then everyone says, where's that? How do you get up there? And I didn't answer anyone. And then, 2-3 years later, someone eventually dies and it's become, this big thing. And I guess where I'm going with that is it's a dilemma then where it says, okay, should I have never done it in the first place? Because I was never in the wrong doing that type of thing. I just went by the curiosity thing, I want to try get an angle of this. I think that'd be cool. And I did it, and I didn't mention where it was, but unfortunately that then inspired others. So that kind of loops back to your original question. And now what I do with my photography is the shots are not in spots where people could go and do it anymore. Whereas, I guess in those areas, it is still, it's still in a highly populated region where, in hindsight, like I just wouldn't shoot that stuff anyway now. But in hindsight, I guess if you do something like that where there's a lot of people around and other enthusiasts, then it's probably going to eventually lead to that type of scenario. Whereas the photography that I do now, I just feel like, there's no, even if one person went out there, you might get one and that's it. And it's not going to cause any impact or any harm or anything. So it's a tricky one, but just to tie it back in, I think the biggest issue is just the social media culture we have, and people want to get the trophy shot. Yep. And like I said, it's not actually photographers, it's mainly just tourists. I've seen it happen time and time again here in Iceland, where people will get out of the bus and they'll run up to the waterfall. Yep. And they'll run right to the front and then they'll turn around and take a selfie. And they actually haven't even looked at the landscape yet. Like they actually haven't stood there and gone, wow, look at this. It frustrates me. And mate, that's why a lot of where I take people now is not too many of those spots anymore, because I don't like being around. I don't like witnessing that. It's just sad to see. And it's a tough one. And then, what's the role as us as landscape photographers then? It's like the damage is almost being done by other people now. So it's tricky, mate. It's just a cultural thing. And it's been good to have the borders shut here for a couple of years to maybe ease up on some of that pressure, but I don't know moving forward what can be done about that stuff, unfortunately.
I don't know as well. And I've sort of, I shoot around Sydney, so, you go to Tarameta Beach or somewhere like that. Well, it's not hard to find. But I've noticed down there's a lot more traffic than Tarameta normally would have. It's a small, secluded sort of cliffside beach that it's not that it's hard to get to, but it's a little bit more effort than, say, Narrabeen, which is just around the corner, just on the other headland. But I saw it happen.
I saw it happen at Cathedral Rocks, mate. When I remember going to Cathedral Rocks, and I would be happily surprised if there was another photographer there. It was like, wow, you're a photographer too? Like, it would shock me to see. You'd spark up a conversation, and then, the last few years that I was living over there, you'd almost have to turn around because it was that busy that you're like, oh, there's no point. I'm not going to be able to actually line up and get an image anywhere. And
part of it to me is also just the enjoyment of the experience. I look at places in America, in the US, there's places now where you've actually got to get a ticket and you line up. Moab National Park, for example, some of the Antelope Canyon and all those sorts of things. You got to get a ticket, you got to line up, and to be honest, and you're basically on a time limit. Here's your time, and you've got to get there and do your shot and then get out. And it's kind
of. But you can see why that's in place, like because it is that busy. Absolutely. But then you say, well, who's at fault? And really, no one's at fault. It just happens to be everyone wants to, everyone got it. It's a tricky one. Like it's almost like a ethical type thing. It's like, well, what do you do? it's a hard one, mate.
Yeah.
Even a Cradle Mountain in Tassie, you've got to get that shuttle bus to the car park. And yeah, and even here in Fiordland, they have toyed with the idea of doing a shuttle service to Milford Sound and not letting self-drive like camper vans go in there anymore. And yeah, it's sad to see that happen. But then, like I said, it's like, well, everyone's just trying to do the same thing. They just want to see a beautiful place. Everyone's entitled to do that. No one's really in the wrong. It just happens to be, it got to a level where it was started to be unsustainable, and yeah, things have to change. And yeah, maybe COVID's a good thing in that regard, because it's probably given a big reset on some of that stuff. But yeah, sometimes it's easy to point the finger, but then when we review everything, it's like, well, we're just all here for the same thing. It just happens to be, it's just popular now. And I think that the advent is social media. That's what's driven a lot of it. And like I said, the majority aren't even actual landscape photographers. They're just there because it was on social media and they want to get that shot on their thing. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I don't think it's a soluble problem either,
It's tricky.
Not something easy to solve. I guess in looking about you or talking about your personal work, how do you go about planning and prepping for one of these unique locations that is out of the way? And I'm not talking Alaska, for example. Let's say one local for you in New Zealand.
So here's an example, right? There's so one time I was doing an aerial and I noticed a valley, this big, beautiful valley as we're flying over it. And there was a specific mountain there that just really stood out to me. It looked quite characteristic, and it wasn't a good for the aerial. It was just something that I went, wow, that looks like a good spot. So then from there, I use topographic map and also Google Earth, and I start to look at it from the perspective of, okay, well, where is it? How could I get there? And then once I figure that out, what time of year would be best? What are the conditions that I'd like to get in that place? So there's one that I've been thinking about for a while, but it's to get to it, I'll need a boat to get across the lake, and the lake's pretty big. So it would be like a 40K boat ride. And I've got a friend he's going to join me, and he's got a little boat we can use. So we've got a boat across, and then from there, it'll be about 8 hours walk, more or less off trail. Well, there is no trail, but you can use deer tracks. There's so many deer here that they kind of make pretty good tracks to at least help out a little bit. And then that'll get me in this general valley. So once I'm there, I don't plan anything beyond that, because then you're just limiting your creativity and your vision. I like to just be spontaneous then and react to the moment. So that's about the extent of the planning. So really, ultimately it's topographic maps and Google Earth are the biggest.
That's more about how to get there than I want to be lined up here with that particular mountain at that particular angle.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, and there's some of the other stuff I have. It's like, oh, that's going to be a good shot up on that ridge line looking down on this thing, but I need the fresh snow. I think that'll be a good winter shot or whatever. And look, some stuff is, you might do what I said, where we catch a boat and then we hike. Some stuff could be hiking only. Some could be driving, then hiking. Some could be utilizing a helicopter to land nearby, but then still hiking after that, depending on where it can land. There's so many variables involved. Look, shots like that, I don't do too many of, because you're just building up a lot of effort for almost 1 to 2 potential photos. And I do enjoy doing that, but still a lot of the photography I do would just be a bit more spontaneous, where it's just going out maybe down a big valley in general, where I don't even have an actual specific mountain peak in mind. Maybe there's multiple mountain peaks, and it's just like, I just want to go down there in the right conditions, and then something will materialize. And it usually always does. You got to have that, allow for nature to do its thing and just be surprised by it. And that just comes down to the time in that general area and trying to time it with good weather as well, the right weather for the photography that I enjoy. Some stuff will be kind of lined right up to that final degree, doing all those logistics. And other times it could just be, hey, let's just go do 4 nights over in the blah, blah, blah valley. And it's like, cool, let's go. And then once I get there, you could walk away with a big dramatic photo, or maybe it was just the way the tree was reflected in the river because there was no wind, and you're like, wow, that was the moment. And I love that. I love not knowing what I'm going to walk away with, and I'm pretty blessed that I don't have to walk away with anything. It's not like I'm getting commissioned to go and take these photos. They're just purely for me and my enjoyment and my portfolio. So I really have over the years removed that burden of, you got to get something here, to just being like, yeah, just go out there and enjoy it. Yep. It's something I say is, it's a bit corny, but I say, let nature do the talking and I just have to do the listening, so I just got to sit there, observe, and just see what's speaking to me essentially. And then the rest just comes natural. It's just, like I said, you got that flow state kicks in and suddenly you've created something that you couldn't have planned. Some of my favorite shots, there's no way you could plan it. It was just being in that area, reacting pretty quickly in a certain moment and just seeing the composition. And then 1 minute it was there and then it was gone. And yeah, to me, that's probably the most enjoyable photography. But yeah, every now and then I'll do one of those ones that's a bit more planning, and it's like, all right, I'm going to go and get this specific mountain or this area and try and make something work. But that's not as often. But yeah, look, definitely, for what I like to do on the workshops, I cater to every fitness level. It's all pretty nice, easy walks, nice, simple locations to get to. But yeah, as it turns out, the photography that I like to do, it's not always the case, but yeah, it does help just having a good level of fitness. So if I need to start scrambling up the base of a mountain, or, I don't like climbing mountains, I like to stay below them, but just some of the bush bashing or just climbing over boulders or going up hills and things, can kind of wear on you after a while. It's just hard carrying the gear. That's the hard part of a photographer. Is luckily I don't carry a tripod, but just by the time you chuck in the body and a lens or two, and then a sleeping bag and food and a tent, and it's like, oh man, how did this get so heavy? And just when you're trying to clamber through forests and things, the fjordland terrain down here is, it's almost as dense as it can get. It's pretty thick and rugged. So once you really commit to going away from any trails, it's you got to kind of have the patience to just push through, and even just that navigational skills, like I said, looking for deer tracks and things like that. But I enjoy it. I really love that side of things, and that's where I feel most alive, when you're putting the blood, sweat and tears into the images. And it's not always the case, but yeah, it's definitely a part of it that I've grown quite fond of.
Yeah. So talk to me about not having a tripod, because most landscape photographers, that's stock in trade, and if you want long expo, it's pretty hard to get that going without some kind of stability.
Yeah, mate. That's how I was. And I remember years ago in Australia, driving half an hour, got to a location and realized I left the tripod at home, and then got cranky and didn't even get out and try. Whereas now, the only time I use a tripod is for astro, and that's maybe 3 times a year if the aurora kicks off, but that's about it. What happened was moving to NZ and where I live and enjoying the elements. I really wanted to get out and shoot in the rain, and I was getting out, because when it rains in some of these areas, you get waterfalls that aren't there without the rain.
Yep.
And I think there was one day where it was hammering down, mate, like 100 mil plus on this given day, and there's just no way you can set a tripod up, because I wanted to climb down into a river. So climb down rocks, set up in a river to get that as my foreground. And then in the background, I just had a mountain with innumerable waterfalls coming down.
Yeah.
And I remember, going to jump out of the car to start walking down. And I was like, there's no way you can set a tripod up. By the time you mount the camera, it's just going to be 100% drenched. It's windy. So I just said, I'm going to have to handhold this. And this is going back to like 2017.
Yeah, right.
And so sure enough, I did. I remember jumping in the creek and I just started shooting, and I wanted to streak the water to get that nice texture on the water.
Yep.
And I just started slowing the shutter down and shooting. And I went, holy moly, like these are sharp. These are 100% sharp from front to back. I've got in that range that I like on the water, around 1/8 of a second,
Yep.
1/6 of a second, even 1/10, just depending on the water flow and everything.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, that was good. And then it just went from there organically, where I just started using the tripod less and less. And then one time when I did go to use the tripod again, I felt so restricted, because once you're handheld, you can make an adjustment just as quickly as you can think of it. You're doing it as you're thinking of tweaking the composition.
You can change the whole composition just by
up, and down. From a flow state perspective, you're still in that flow because you're just doing it. You're not even thinking. The tripod was breaking my sense of flow and connection to the landscape, and I just went, nah. And I remember like getting because it was in a forest, this particular one. I was trying to get a sun star, lining this shot up, and it was like the second you lined it up, the sun moved, and then the sun star wasn't there. And I just went, nah, no way. And I just haven't used one since, like I said, unless it's astro. And I've just figured out, what my thresholds are with shutter speeds. The thing is, if you like doing astro, you got to have a tripod. And if you like doing blue hour long exposures, yes, obviously you need a tripod. But I love light. The key element in every photo of mine is good quality light, typically. So if there's light, then it's not that dark, and I'm able to get sharp images that are low ISO, tack sharp from front to back. And even, focus stacking handheld is not an issue. You just don't bounce around like a maniac, and, it's easy. You just do it. So I've just developed my own little workflows. And these are the things that I put in my tutorials, for example, of just, how I do it, why I do it. And yeah, for me, the whole point still is just that creative freedom that I get out there. I couldn't do it without a mirrorless camera. So the mirrorless cameras have like the inbuilt image stabilization.
Yeah, so the body stabilization plus.
Yeah, in body. Yeah, exactly. So that helps you big time. If I'm on a DSLR, then no way, I can't get down that to the speeds that I need to be at. But I started shooting mirrorless in 2013. And then it was around like 2014, 2015 when the stabilization came into the bodies. So it's just been something that I've just been able to do ever since. And no looking back really. And I'll show people on my workshops, and if they've got a mirrorless, they're like, wow, and it kind of frees them up. Some people, it's just not for them, and they like the methodic approach with the tripod. And then other people, they might have a DSLR, and it's like, look, we're probably getting a bit risky here. Why don't we just play it safe? Because the debate is it worth sometimes the effort that could be required in Photoshop? Let's say I require 3 seconds on the river. Maybe the river's moving really slow and I just need like 2 to 3 seconds. What I will do is I'll do a first shot at, say, 1/10 or even 1/8. Now, everything's sharp, it's all good, but the river's not the right flow. So then without moving, I'll slow the shutter speed down. I'll do it at 5 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever I need. And then in Photoshop, it's very quickly within, say, 2 minutes, just to line those two images up and blend in, mask in that slow shutter water. Now the job's done. For some people, the effort to do that, it's probably easier to go back, get a tripod, set it up, take the shot. But for me, like I said, I'd rather just do a little bit more later on in the computer, which is still pretty minimal, than get a tripod or set it up. And I just don't carry one. Like, it just stays here in my little studio and I use it for my tutorials. But that's about it. But if the Aurora fires up, or maybe I'll do a bit of Milky Way photography this year, I'm coming around to that idea. Then I'll definitely get the tripod out. But I think for anyone listening, it's worth trying. I remember I just wouldn't even try. I'd assume that I needed it. And then it wasn't until I did try and I was like, oh, okay. It's like I had something in my head that said, oh, you need a tripod as a landscape photographer, but it's just not true. And I've heard other people, not necessarily landscape photographers, but other professionals say you can't get sharp photos without a tripod. And I'm like, it's just not true, mate. Like some of the prints are like 60 inches and it's just tack sharp. Like every image I make, I zoom in on the screen, and if it's not sharp, then I shoot it again. So it's definitely worth experimenting with anyway, that's for sure, and see if it suits for the individual.
Oh, that's fantastic. What's your most notable experience that you've had while out shooting?
Oh, mate, I feel like every year you get like 2 to 3 that you just know you're never going to forget. As you ask that question, I just have little flashbacks of, I've stood in sea caves, at Crescent Head Sea Cave, and I've been inside that sea cave when a violent lightning storm was overhead. And I just sat there and continuously shot exposure after exposure, admittedly on a tripod, actually, back then, because I had to for this lightning shot. And knowing that the lightning is going to come, it's going to be right outside this cave. And then minutes before that happened, a rainbow formed on the horizon. And I was like, wow, would you look at that? Like there's, the storm must be clearing and this big bow appeared. And then within that same 1 minute window, two forks of lightning just shot straight down the middle of the cave. And I got that all, single shot, just back of camera, the rainbow, the lightning. And I remember just being physically shook. And I had a similar thing at Cathedral Rocks. Just I had the vision in mind of, I want to get lightning at Cathedral Rocks. This is back in 2014. And I knew I'd get it one day. And then finally being there and you're doing it and you're looking at it on the back of the camera while the rain's hammering down and there's violent, vibrations from the storm. And you're looking at on the back of the camera, these lightning bolts directly behind, it transcends words almost. It's like, it's just an experience that you can't even describe because some things I've tried to achieve, or it's like, as a percentage, it's pretty slim chances of seeing it happen. And then when it does, another one was, and this is not really about getting an image, was in 2020, we had a big storm come through here. Mm-hmm. And when there's a big storm in Fiordland, I love to get out and try capture the way the waterfalls, hit the mountains and everything. Yeah. And normally like what you'd call a good storm in Fiordland would be 100 mil plus. Sometimes, you get 200 mils in a day. Yeah, it's quite a lot. And this one was looking like around the 300 mil range. And I was like, wow, this one's going to be a real, this is going to be something different here. There's going to be waterfalls that appear that may not appear for another 5-10 years type thing. And when I say waterfalls, I mean a specific waterfall in a row of another 90 waterfalls, you know what I mean? Like just taking it to that another level. So I went in on this day for this storm and I spent the night down in a valley where there was an old campground that had been there since the 1930s, had all these historic cabins. It was a real rustic type place. And that night, mate, the storm came in. And by the time we woke up at 7 a.m., the cabin I was in was already being flooded by the river. And to cut a long story short, instead of 300 mils, 1,000 mils came in within that 1.5 day, 2 day window. And it absolutely obliterated the place. It just turned into anarchy. And I'd never seen such power. The river, if you put a 4-wheel drive in it, it would have pushed it like a leaf. It was horrifying. And I had to escape out of this valley. And I ended up getting stranded somewhere. I ended up getting helicopter evacuated out. Wow. And to this day, they're still doing, that was 2020, they're still doing road repairs and, the trees being lifted up and thrown across there. It was just, the power was unbelievable. So, that's just another one that comes to mind as well. So there's just always these moments that, whether there was a photograph involved or not, just seeing certain things happen. A lot of it as well is, I've done aerials where I've lined up, waited for the full moonrise to line up with something right on sunset. And the chances of doing that with aerials is so slim because the weather, clouds, wind, there's all these factors. And then, finally like witnessing it, something that you think about for a year or two, and then suddenly you're there looking at it. Yeah, it's just, mate, that's what I do it for. And, most of those photos, they don't even always resonate with other people, but they're the ones that that's not what it's been about for me. It's just about being what I want to actually see with my eyes and then try and, translate through the camera. So, yeah, mate, there's been a lot of humbling moments. And I guess that's what drives you when it all comes. Every photographer's probably experienced that to some degree, whether it's something quite simple of, I just want to get a nice pink sunset over your favorite beach. Yep. And then you just start to raise the bar for yourself. And when those things do align, and it's just all about passion and perseverance really at the end of the day. And that's something that I think has kept me just so inspired with photography, because I can always think of something bigger and better. I'm never really 100% content with my images. I can always look at it and think, but what if this happened or this and that? And then I think, well, it could, it probably will. I just need to be there when it does happen.
Exactly it.
Yeah. So that just keeps driving me to keep getting out there. And mate, it keeps you grounded when you're out there in nature, and it does these things. It just really puts everything into perspective. And that's what I'm most thankful for. That's what photography's given me, is it's kept me grounded and kept sight of the bigger picture.
Yeah. Have you ever hit a creative wall? And if so, how did you handle it?
Yes, a lot of people ask that one, because I know like a lot of clients, they maybe go through that. They won't touch the camera for months and months. And look, I've very rarely, I don't know why, very rarely have had that. The only time I had that in 10 years or more was, mate, it was probably a year or two ago. It was just, I don't know, it was, with the pandemic and everything. And yeah, it's just us, it's a bit of a mental health factor as well. I just started kind of just wasn't feeling it anymore. And yeah, it probably only lasted like 2 to 3 weeks. And the other thing that was happening was, yeah, I remember this now actually. Sometimes with my photography, when you've been doing it this long and you're trying to raise the bar and just trying to always better, you're not content. You just want to keep getting better and better. Eventually the opportunity of success, it just gets so narrow. And what happens with me anyway is that I just start talking myself out of even trying because you assume that it's not going to work, So I'd be like, oh, what should I try to shoot this week? And then you check the weather and nah, it's not going to be right for this thing or that thing. And I started getting to the point where the visions I had in my head for the images I wanted to make, they were just so specific that, they're going to be hard to get. And therefore I just wasn't even trying. And it went on for a few weeks. And then I eventually just pulled myself out and said, I need to just go for a few days in the wilderness with no photography ambitions in mind and just get out there, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So I did that. And sure enough, it was moment after moment that just jumped out at me. And it was these moments that, and I said this earlier, it's moments that you could never have planned. All you had to do was be there at the right time. Yeah, and you only see those if you're out there having a go. Absolutely. And, like I'm talking about, I walked past a waterfall in a forest and I just happened to be there as the sun was just cresting over the side of the waterfall and then the light was hitting the mist. So I had those beams, those beams that you see someone put in Photoshop or something, and just being there at the right time for that. And just a few little things like that happened. And it was just like, man, if you don't get out and just enjoy nature first and foremost, then you're going to miss every opportunity, aren't you?
Absolutely.
So that was kind of the only time I really got in a bit of a slump. And I use that as a good lesson for myself now. Like, just get out there, just go out, have a walk. And if you see something, you see something. But once you start kind of loading yourself up with high expectations, then yeah, you can slowly just lose the drive. And that's one hard thing it doesn't happen with me, but with social media, I know other people, they're on social media a lot and they're looking at the best of the best. That's what social media is. You're looking at other professionals, you're looking at stuff that they might have waited 10 years to capture. And within a 1 minute window, you're bombarding yourself with potentially, 20 of those images, world-class, high-end, really difficult things. So, of course, when you put your phone down, you're probably going to feel a bit flat because it's like, well, how can you compare with that? And and people compare themselves too much, and social media can get the better of people. So that's something years ago I could see that how that happens, and I've never really used it too much from an inspiration perspective or anything, because it can lead to burnout pretty easily. I think the best thing you can do is just get out and enjoy the scenery that you enjoy with or without the camera. And then I think the inspiration will tie back to you. But if you're looking for external inspiration all the time, it doesn't last. The best inspiration's got to come from within. And I think it comes from within when you're connecting with what matters to you the most. And as a landscape photographer, it's going to be something out in nature. It can't be on the screen. It's just, that's so temporary. It's just going to be, it'll burn off in 30 seconds. You've got to get that connection going with what it is you love and what drives you.
Yeah, totally agree. There's nothing worse, I think, than getting into that thought pattern of, I'll never be as good as so-and-so, or, comparing yourself to somebody else. Those comparisons, I've always sort of said they don't mean anything, because everyone is at a different stage in their photography journey. And, some people are faster learners, better at picking things up. They may have an edge because they've got better skills in Photoshop or whatever than somebody else, And
some people have more time. Some people, they can go out every day of the week. There's so many variables, and it's just, and unfortunately people compare. Yeah, exactly. And people compare, you see school kids do it. They compare, oh, I don't look as pretty as that person. And we got to remember, at the end of the day, social media is a highlight reel. You're only seeing the best of the best. No one's seeing the hardship that goes on behind the scenes. And when it comes to something like art, photography, even music, it's like you should have something you look up to and aspire towards. But you're on your own individual journey, and we all start at the same point, which is at the bottom. And then from there, you forge your own track. And I think, yeah, too much comparison, you start to, instead of forging your own track, you just start to walk around in circles, and then you've just lost sight. So I always say to people, just remember why you picked the camera up. That's what this should still always be about. And that's why I said earlier about when it comes to doing it as a career, I say to people, just if your motives are right, then things will come. But if the motives are, kind of tainted with other ideas, then it could be walking uphill most of the time. So, and it's a delicate balance. It's easier said than done, not comparing too much. But the best thing you can do is just unfollow or mute people, like you just got to be honest and say, when I look at this stuff or whatever it is, how do I feel? How do I truly feel? Do I feel uplifted and inspired, or is it just kind of making me feel like I'm not good enough, or I'm never going to be able to achieve certain things? And if it is, then just turn it off. We have the power to do that. And for me, a big part is just, and people probably think I'm a snob, but I just don't follow that many people online, because I'd rather just go to someone's website, have a look properly, take my time. It's full screen. That's where I want to view someone's work, or in a book or something. But when it comes to social media, it's like, it's just not the right resolution. The display is wrong. There's so many factors there that are wrong. So I think it's a tricky one. It's good to connect with like-minded people and share your work, but it's a juggling act. You got to be careful how much you consume. Anyway, I'm going on a rant about it, but
no, it's good. It's a good rant, one that I wholeheartedly support too.
Even my wife, she's not a photographer, but she'll just delete Instagram or Facebook almost every week, and just delete it for a week and then put it back on, because, she just like, we just get sucked into looking at stuff that maybe you didn't even want to look at. And then now you're thinking thoughts that it's like, why am I thinking about this now? And it's pretty crazy the way it all works. So I think, just taking control of what we do. And I know for me, every few months, I'll just delete apps off the phone and just don't have them on there. And to be honest, I don't really miss them. I have to force myself to get back on there. But I think it's healthy to kind of have that reset and just be present in the moment. And you notice that you're a bit more in tune with everything when you do that. It's just, everyone's different, but just getting that right balance, I think, is pretty healthy and is key to keeping your inspiration at the highest it can be anyway.
Absolutely. If you weren't a photographer, what would you be?
Oh, man, I don't know. Like when I was a tradesman, I was an air conditioning mechanic. So it was a lot of electrical work. And now I just don't like doing much hands-on stuff around the house. I'm happy to employ someone else to come in, and I'll do electrical stuff around the house. But when it comes to building things and painting, I'm just like, I'll get someone else in, like that's their job. They do their thing. I'll do my thing. And if I had to do something else as a career, I know, with the pandemic and everything, I had a mindset of, whatever it takes to put food on the table, I'll just do it. I've got to provide for my family. And I've got a mate who does a lot of different work here. He's a pilot part-time, but then he does a lot of work in the national parks here. They have a lot of traps which help trap like predators that harm the native birds. So rats and stoats and possums and things. There's thousands of these traps. And one of his jobs is going out and bush bashing and creating these trap lines, so then other guys can come in and lay the traps. And so he gets to go out in nature and spend a week at a time in these remote areas. Right. And he's out bush bashing and so I'm like, man, I could actually see myself, doing that. Like, that's pretty good, just to be out in the elements. And he does a bit of work on farms, and I don't know, I'd be happy working with my hands and just doing kind of hands-on things. But just, I realize now, being a full-time photographer, that I am more of a creative person than more, like a mechanical minded person. And looking back, I can see that now. In my childhood, I was always drawing and just always sketching away in a pad. And then when I was a teenager, I was skateboarding, which is creative. And I was also videoing skateboarding and editing video clips of my mates. So there was always actually a bit of a creative outlet there. I don't know. I don't really know the exact answer, but I think it would have to be something creative to some degree. But at the same time, I wouldn't mind being hands-on. I don't know. Going around in circles here, but it's a hard one to answer, to be honest. It's tricky. I know my soul would I'd be crushed if I couldn't
take a photo again.
Yeah, if I couldn't, and just, I've got a lot of freedom with this, to get some of the
Sure.
images, you're kind of dropping everything sometimes because this moment's coming and you're like, I need to be out here to get this. The moon's rising now, whatever it is, there's some, and yeah, it sounds selfish to be honest, but it's just part of sometimes to get the most elusive moments in nature, you got to be there. And yeah, so I do have a lot of freedom, and yeah, it would crush me to lose. I'd do anything to provide for my family, but I love being able to just have those connections with nature. So it'd be pretty tough to lose that. And even look, to be honest, making video tutorials is not my cup of tea. I don't mind being out there talking to the camera and doing it, but I really don't like getting home with 30 gigabytes of video footage and you got B-roll and then you got to add music and then you got to add captions. And it's like, man, I'd rather outsource that, but I'm just not really in a position to do it. So,
Yeah.
Even at the moment, a good portion of my job is, I couldn't say I love it per se, but I'm still grateful because it does allow me to still be creative and everything. So, yeah, anyway, that's enough on that, rambling on.
No, that's fine. What do you like to do when you're not out shooting?
I just love family time, to be honest. I love, I'll go in when the kids get home at 3. I'll make sure that go in and have afternoon tea with them and just play toys or wrestle them. I take my son likes fishing, so we'll go fishing. Just being outdoors is really fun. We went for a family hike the other week and the kids did 9Ks and we stayed in a hut overnight and then we did 9Ks back out and it was like, wow, how rewarding. That's really fun to do. And I just love the simple stuff. That's what photography's done for me. Just stripped it all back. I'm not big on movies. I don't play video games or anything. It's just, I just want to be out looking at something nice. I'm at home. I'm always the instigator of, come on, let's go. We're going to go do this thing. Like that hike we did, we only decided that at midday. I was like, come on, we need to all get out. And because I could tell my wife kind of needed a bit of time out there too. Yeah. So I was like, come on, let's go. The kids will be right. We can do this. I'll pack the bags and we'll be right. We'll get to the hut before sunset and then off we went. So, I just enjoy nature, being outdoors. And I've actually done a little bit of hunting as well. There's a lot of deer here, which was, it's not native. And unfortunately, the deer decimates the forest because that's what they eat. So there's a big pest control thing here with the Department of Conservation is trying to, they got to keep the number of deer at a certain level when it gets too high. Yep. I've got a lot. Hunting's pretty big where I live, and I went out hunting. I haven't eaten meat in years, but when it's something that's going to actually help the landscape from a conservation perspective, I was pretty open to it. And I've gone out hunting a couple of times. And just going out and like trying to stalk an animal, and that's pretty cool. It's actually quite exciting, even if you don't. Obviously, you don't have to shoot the animal or anything, but so that's quite fun.
You can always shoot them with your camera.
That's it, mate. Yeah, exactly. That's the goal, actually. I'd love to try and incorporate the Kia into my images, the wild parrot here, but to get a deer, that's amazing how smart these animals are. They can smell you from a mile away. But that's a goal, to get like a deer in the grand landscape would be amazing. So yeah, anything outdoors and with the family. I really don't do anything myself. I like going to the gym. I'll go to the gym each day. I like to lift weights and stuff, but otherwise, it's just, all right, let's go chill somewhere and throw some stones down the lake or something simple like that. Yeah.
Cool. So I guess starting to wrap up, I've got a couple more questions for you. Are there any photographers out there that you think I should be talking to?
Have a chat with my cousin, Warren Keelan. He's an ocean photographer that lives in Wollongong, where I used to live. He's got a gallery there and he's been a professional longer than I have. And yeah, he's good. He's a good talk, and his images are amazing, beautiful ocean images. And he's
I've followed Warren.
Warren, yeah. So yeah, I don't get to catch up with him much because when we do, it goes for like 3 hours, and it's like, oh, whoops, didn't plan for that to happen. But when we do catch up, it's just he's got a similar mindset to me, and it's cool. I like talking with people that have been in the industry that long, like even myself, where you've just seen so many different trends and phases, and yeah, it's just always interesting just to kind of sit back and observe. And so yeah, Warren's good to chat to. I know you spoke with Jeff Freestone recently as well. I know Jeff, he did a workshop with me years back, and it's been good watching his photography blossom. I don't know, mate. I'm not sure, to be honest. It's like I said, I don't have my ear to the ground too much with landscape photography. I just don't need to look at it too closely. But Yeah, look, all I know is the standard of photography now is just so high. When I see images from places that I used to photograph years ago, I'm like, wow, look how that guy shot this. And
Yeah.
the level of knowledge and learning is, really
Well, it's just so
magnified.
much more accessible too, isn't it?
More accessible, and just the internet and people like me putting tutorials out, for example, it makes the learning so much easier. When I learnt, there would have been YouTube around, but it didn't cross your mind to look something up on. Like I
Yeah.
never did that. I learned old
I call
school,
it
just
YouTube
trial and error.
University.
Yeah, the University of YouTube. Yeah, exactly. I just remember going out and just pushing buttons, and then every now and then I'd run into somebody and they'll be like, "Oh, put it in AV mode, mate, and you'll be able to get a." And just random tips like that. That's kind of how I learned, and then just applying it and getting it wrong and going, okay, how do I problem solve? But yeah, now it's like, or even like I said, you could do a workshop and within a few days, it's like, that's the look I get on people's faces, where you can see they had 12 months of YouTube University going around in circles. And then you show them hands on in a few hours and they're like, finally. And yeah, so the level of learning just seems to be a lot higher. It's been pretty cool just to see the standard. Like, I know you had Ben Mays on, so I talked to Ben a little bit. You should get Dylan Fox. He's over in WA. Okay. I talked to Dylan a fair bit, and he's got a pretty cool eye and just a nice collection of images. He does a little bit of everything, and I think he does it quite well. And he's been around for some time too, just on the side, just doing his thing. And yeah, so Dylan Fox would be a good one to have a yarn with. But no, look, it's exciting. It's a good time to be a photographer. And when I do see the standard of work out there, particularly when it's something fresh, like from something I haven't really seen photographed before too much, it's like, wow, well done. Like, that is just really unique and it's good to see. But look, as I said earlier, I'm just an advocate for people being photographers in general, just because of the way it can really just make you appreciate life and things so much more. So I don't care if someone goes and shoots the same thing 500 times over, like I did back in the day. I'd shoot the jetty and the Wollongong lighthouses all day, every day. And it's like, that's great. Gets you outside, get some fresh air, and you get those creative juices going. So it is good to see that. But it is, honestly, it's a bit overwhelming when I'll see a name that I've never even heard of, and then I see their portfolio and I'm like, oh, wow, like this is world class. A few years ago, this would have been the best images you could ever make. It's so common to see that now. And like you said, it's just so accessible.
Yeah.
Even with travel before COVID, it was so easy for people just to travel here, there and everywhere and go to all the places and get amazing photos. It's just the era that we've kind of been in. So it is nice, though, to see.
One of the best eras to be a photographer in, to be honest.
Yeah, it is. And as I said, I think before we started recording, even when it comes to camera gear, it's like you almost can't go wrong now. It's everything really high end. And people always ask me about gear, and I just say to them, look, every brand now pretty much has something that's going to be awesome. You can't really stuff it up. But I remember years back, you could make a very costly mistake years ago if you didn't get the right sensor or something. But now they just tick the boxes. The technology's come so far, so that's good. It's definitely a good time. Although I will say, not a good time to order stuff online. I've been waiting about 4 weeks for a lens to come. And a lot of holdups with the shipping, but yeah.
All right, I've got one last question, and for many photographers, it's one of the most important issues that we can talk about. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Nah, mate. Nah, that's offensive to me.
Okay, fair enough.
My kids love it, and my wife, but no, pineapple for me that's like a dessert type. That's a sweet. I don't like sweet with savory. No, keep it separate.
I'll have to do the numbers one day and work out where we stand, because
I'd imagine it's probably 50-50 maybe.
I don't know. I'll have to have a look. I haven't actually done them, but
it's like the pineapple on a burger. It's like, why? It's just you go in one direction and then bang, it's just no, come on, you got to commit one way or the other. That's it. Can't have both.
Fair enough. All right. Well, thanks very much for taking the time to talk to me, William. It's been absolutely marvellous getting to know you a bit better and learning more about how you do what you do. Where can people find your work?
Mate, all the usual places. Thanks for having me on, by the way. And just pop my name in Instagram or Google, and you'll see me come up in any of your favorite applications of choice. Actually, if I was going to plug anything, I'll just say YouTube. I've been using YouTube a little bit more the last year, and I've been kind of enjoying it. So, if anyone's interested in just seeing some bite-sized tutorials and even some behind-the-scenes adventures and stuff, jump on YouTube. It's kind of been refreshing just to get on a different platform and put some time into that. So, but otherwise, I'll come up everywhere else that you search my name.
Excellent. I'll put links in the show notes, of course.
Cool.
Thanks so much for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.